You can work 12 hours today, answer every message, sit through every meeting, and still end this year exactly where you started. That sentence should bother you. It bothered a lot of people who thought being busy was the same thing as getting somewhere. Here's the trap. Somewhere along the way, most of us started measuring our days by how full they felt instead of by what they actually built. A packed calendar feels like proof. Exhaustion feels like evidence. If you're tired at the end of the day, surely that means you did something, right? Not necessarily. There's a difference between motion and progress, and almost nobody teaches you to tell them apart. Jim Rohn spent decades studying that difference, and one image he came back to again and again was a rocking chair. A rocking chair moves constantly. It creaks. It rocks. It never stops. And it never leaves the room. Compare that to a train. A train might move slower. It might even stop for a while. But it has a destination, and eventually, it arrives. Which one is your week starting to look like? This isn't about working harder. You've probably already tried that. And if you're honest, it hasn't solved the problem. It's just made the exhaustion more impressive. This is about something most people never stop long enough to ask. Is my activity actually taking me anywhere, or is it just taking up my time? By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why so many hardworking, well-intentioned people stay busy for years without moving forward. And more importantly, what Jim Rohn taught about building a life on purpose instead of by accident. If any part of this sounds like you're weak, tell me in the comments. I genuinely like to know what busy looks like for you right now. Because the real question was never, am I busy? It's busy doing what? The difference between motion and progress. Picture getting into your car without deciding where you're going. You could drive all day. You'd burn a full tank of gas, rack up plenty of miles, wear down the tires, and still end up somewhere you never intended to be. Nobody would call that a successful trip. Yet that's exactly how a lot of people run their lives. And nobody questions it, because it's disguised as hard work. Effort without direction doesn't disappear. It just scatters. You can pour real energy into your day and still produce very little. Not because you're lazy, but because you never decided what you were actually building. The phone rings, so you answer it. The email lands, so you reply. The meeting gets scheduled, so you show up. None of those things are wrong on their own. The problem is that when you let other people's requests set your agenda all day, every day, you eventually discover that you've spent the whole year responding and never once directing. This is where Jim Rohn's teaching gets uncomfortable in the best way. He didn't let people off the hook by blaming their circumstances. He pointed to a simple, testable principle. Activity needs direction. If you don't know where you're trying to go, working harder will not get you there faster. It'll just get you lost more efficiently. Think about how this plays out in real life. Someone spends the year saying yes to every opportunity that lands in front of them. Every request, every favor, every quick call, every new idea that sounds exciting in the moment. They're not lazy. They're not avoiding work. If anything, they're working themselves thin. But when December comes and they look back, the year feels like a blur. They can list everything they did, but they can't point to what it built. That's the part that stings. Busy doesn't mean building. A full calendar doesn't mean a full life. And the version of you that finishes this year exhausted but directionless is not somehow more virtuous than the version who worked with intention. Even if the second version looks, from the outside, a little less frantic. Here's the twist most people never expect. The busiest looking people in any room are often the least strategic. The people who seem to be moving slower, who take time to think before they act, are frequently the ones actually arriving somewhere. Speed was never the variable that mattered. Direction was. Building the blueprint. So if motion isn't the answer, what is? Before a building becomes real, it exists as an idea. No architect starts throwing bricks onto a lot and hopes a house appears out of the rubble. There's a design first. There's a structure drawn out, understood, and agreed upon before a single brick is laid. Jim Rohn taught that your life works exactly the same way. You have to build it twice. First in your mind, then in reality. Skip the first build, and the second one becomes accidental. A clear vision gives your effort somewhere to go. Without it, Everything competes equally for your attention. Every new opportunity looks important because you have no filter to measure it against. Every interruption feels urgent because urgency and importance start to blur together when you don't have a target. And slowly, without ever making a conscious decision, other people's priorities become your priorities. Not because they took them from you, but because you never claimed your own. Here's the good news. Your blueprint doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. Take a sheet of paper, an actual piece of paper, not a passing thought, and write down what you genuinely want to accomplish. Don't leave it vague. I want to be successful is not a target. It's a mood. What do you actually want to build? What do you want your finances to look like a year from now? What do you want to have learned? What do you want your relationships, your health, your work to actually be? Not in general, but specifically. The clearer the target, the easier it becomes to organize your actions around it. A vague goal produces vague effort. A specific goal produces a specific life. Once you have that target, decisions get dramatically easier. You can ask a simple question about anything competing for your time. Does this move me closer to what I'm trying to build? If the answer is no, you now have permission to let it go. Not out of guilt, but out of clarity. That single question, asked consistently, will do more to protect your time than any productivity app or morning routine ever could. And here's what tends to surprise people the most. Once you actually write the blueprint down, you start noticing how much of your current busyness was never serving it at all. What happens without a plan? Without a target, something else quietly takes control. Jim Rohn called it drift. Drift rarely looks dangerous at the start. You don't wreck your future in one afternoon. Nobody does. Instead, you postpone one decision, then another. You tell yourself you'll figure it out later. Once things calm down, once you have more time, once the timing feels right. You wait for a perfect opportunity that was never going to announce itself. And in the meantime, you let circumstances choose your direction for you. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. And one day, you look around and genuinely wonder, how did I end up here? The honest answer, almost every time, is simple. You never deliberately chose where you were going. Life carried you there instead. Think of a boat with no one at the helm. The water doesn't need to be violent to take it somewhere else. A gentle current is enough, given enough time. That's the quiet danger in drifting. It doesn't feel like a crisis in the moment. It feels like just another ordinary week. It's only years later that the pattern becomes visible. This is exactly why a written goal is different from a wish floating around in your head. A wish stays soft and negotiable. Easy to abandon the moment, something more comfortable comes along. Writing a goal down forces you to define it. It turns a feeling into something specific enough to measure. But don't stop there, because a goal only tells you where you want to go. A plan tells you how you're going to get there. And that distinction is where most people quietly stall out. Say you want to build a business. Writing "start a business" on a sticky note isn't a plan. It's a wish with better handwriting. A real plan breaks it down. Research the market, develop the offer, find the first customers, set weekly targets, learn the skills you're missing, create real deadlines. Suddenly, the dream has structure. It has edges. It has a next step you can actually take today. And that's when a plan becomes powerful enough to change how you spend your Tuesday. If any part of this is landing for you, if you're starting to see where your own drift has been happening, that's exactly the kind of insight worth sharing. Like this video, and send it to someone who's been busy for a long time without quite knowing where it's leading. Sometimes the most useful thing you can hand someone isn't advice. It's the right question at the right time. Putting the plan on the calendar. Here's where most people fail. And it isn't at the goal-setting stage. They have goals. They even have plans written down somewhere. But they never schedule the actual work. And a plan that never makes it onto a calendar is just a well-organized wish. "I'll do it when I have time" is one of the most dangerous sentences a person can say to themselves, because that time rarely just appears. Life will always offer another phone call, another problem, another meeting, another distraction dressed up as urgent. If something genuinely matters to you, it needs a place on your calendar. A vague intention floating somewhere in the back of your mind. Want to exercise? Schedule it. Want to study something new? Schedule it. Want to build a business or write a book? Schedule the actual writing time, the actual working hours. Your calendar isn't just a list of appointments. It's a defense system for your priorities. If you don't decide how your time gets used, someone or something else will decide for you. But a plan also has to stay flexible because life doesn't follow your schedule with any real loyalty. Markets shift. Opportunities you didn't expect show up, and ones you were counting on disappear. Sometimes the goal that felt essential 6 months ago quietly stops mattering as much as it once did. None of that means your plan failed. It means it needs adjusting. Think of your plan as a map, not a set of handcuffs. You can change the route and still keep the destination. That's why reviewing your progress regularly matters so much. Ask yourself honestly, what worked? What didn't? What changed? What deserves less of my attention now? And what deserves more? Small corrections made early prevent enormous problems later. You never have to wait until you're completely lost before you're allowed to change direction. And this is where accountability earns its place. A plan becomes far more powerful the moment you start measuring what's actually happening. Track your habits. Record your results. Review the numbers instead of just your feelings about the week. If your goal is fitness, measure the workouts. If it's business growth, track the sales and the leads. If it's learning something new, track the hours you actually practiced, not the hours you meant to. What gets measured becomes visible, and what becomes visible can finally be improved. Sometimes that accountability comes from someone else entirely. A mentor, a coach, a trusted friend willing to ask the question you wouldn't ask yourself. Did you actually do what you said you would do? That question can sting a little. Good. Discomfort like that isn't an insult. It's information. It tells you exactly where you're improving and exactly where you've been quietly wasting time. Direction over perfection. Here's something worth saying plainly. The goal was never to build a perfect plan. Waiting for perfection is often just procrastination, wearing a more respectable outfit. Some people spend months planning because planning feels safer than acting. They want every detail solved before they take a single step. But you can't discover everything from a distance. At some point, you have to move before you can see what the next step actually looks like. A simple plan you actually execute will always beat a brilliant plan sitting untouched in a notebook. Start. Take the action. Observe what happens. Make the correction. Then continue. That cycle. Plan, act, review, adjust, repeat, is where real progress has always come from. And it's the same cycle Jim Rohn taught to rooms full of people who thought they needed one dramatic breakthrough to change their lives. They didn't, and neither do you. Because when you repeat that cycle consistently, something quiet but powerful starts happening. Small improvements begin to compound. One productive day won't transform your life. Honestly, one focused week probably won't either. But hundreds of focused days, strung together with intention, absolutely will. The difference was never one giant move. It's the right small moves, made repeatedly, until what once felt difficult simply becomes normal. That's how a designed life gets built. Not through one extraordinary day, but through ordinary days handled with intention. So before you close this video, ask yourself a few honest questions. What am I actually trying to accomplish? Do I have a written goal, or just a feeling I've been calling a goal? Do I have a real plan? And have I actually scheduled the actions it requires? Am I measuring my progress or just hoping it's happening? And when something clearly isn't working, am I willing to change it? Because being busy was never the goal. Looking productive was never the goal. Exhaustion was never the goal. Progress is the goal. And it was the only one that ever counted. Your time is moving whether you have a plan or not. The calendar keeps turning regardless of what you decide today. The only real question is what those years end up producing. So stop letting a full day convince you it was automatically a productive one. Decide what actually matters. Build the blueprint. Turn the vision into a specific goal, the goal into a real plan, and the plan into scheduled, measurable action. Then review it, adjust it, and show up again tomorrow. You don't need to see the entire journey from here. You just need enough clarity to take the next step in the right direction. Jim Rohn spent his life teaching exactly this. that a busy life is not automatically a successful one. Motion can create a lot of noise. Direction is what creates progress. If this way of thinking is useful to you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next, and keep building on purpose, one intentional day at a time.